Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Plaw.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast, your weekly podcast for all things PowerShell, security, developer, career, a bunch of stuff. We've had over 100 episodes, so check them out if you haven't so far. But this week on the pre-show, we have some cool stuff coming up, cool stuff in the past, and some cool projects. So February 28th, we have the Gainesville PowerShell meetup. We're doing an in-person meetup at the Alachua County Library at 5:45 p.m. We'll be doing lightning demos. If you're interested in doing a demo, feel free to message me on Discord or post on the meetup. Thank you for the kind email last week about last week's episode. I really appreciate everyone who reached out. I'll share a message here. It was super fun getting to talk to Graham and reminisce and kind of go back and reflect, because it's sort of been a while since I've done that, and getting the chance to sort of rehash some memories with Graham and share that with you all was super fun. Appreciate whoever reached out and said, "Hey, Andrew, last episode was really good. So much relatable to my journey in many ways." Smiley face, smiley face. Thank you. I want to share a resource this week, which I thought was pretty cool. Jared Fossen has released his Sec 505 scripts from his SANS PowerShell course. You can check that out at blueteampowershell.com. Shout out to Jason Fossen. And the tip of the week, usually we do these as community tip of the weeks, but I had one that I wanted to share. So the tip of the week is enable script block logging with protected event logging enabled. And this is super important. It's a great first step you can take, implement it with GPO, because when it's enabled, PowerShell records the content of all script blocks that it processes. And these logs can be viewed in the event log and applications and services logs, Microsoft Windows PowerShell. And you can actually read a help article about this. If you are on PowerShell 5.1, you can do help space about _ logging. Or if you're on 7, you could do help about logging Windows or help about logging non-Windows. Check us out on the Inner Circle. We got a PDQ channel with the PowerShell scripting channel. It's been popping off lately. Shout out to everybody who's joined us from the podcast. It's been really awesome to have a small group of people who listen and share things and contribute. It's a fun little community we have there. So check us out there. And I wanted to share a resource, a module this week, but I said, this ain't for me. Let's ask the expert himself. So joining us today on the PowerShell podcast is none other than Jake. Trimark Jake, as I know him on some places. He is a devoted father, tech enthusiast with over 2 decades of experience. That's like double me, so probably twice as smart. And we're going to talk about Jake's journey, security, impressions, transitions, PowerShell projects, how we got there, insights along the way, maybe a little work-life balance. I didn't tell you that on the pre-show, but maybe just a little bit. I could use some advice. I know we're both musicians and like to have a little fun there. And welcome to the show, man.
Hey, good. Thanks for having me on, man. So happy to be here. I think I told you I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but I picked this one up recently. So yeah,
Perfect.
Now that I started working from home, I don't have a 20 to 30 minute drive every day to and fro to listen to podcasts. So yeah, you're there.
Shout out to everybody driving right now, listening to us. Have a great day at work. I hope you had a good one. But with you, we are now coming full circle on the Locksmith module. All of the core contributors have now officially been on the podcast.
That's right. And Sam and Spencer both showed up in the last, 2 months or so?
Yeah. And how we got the mastermind behind the project himself. Very curious to hear about how that transpired from your perspective and sort of hearing how you got into security in general. So maybe we can go back to early on in your career, sort of where you were, where you found PowerShell, and then eventually we can get into the security transition after that.
Did you want to mention the module that we were gonna plug a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I got so distracted.
Right past that. Yeah,
I totally did. Thankfully, I have you here to keep me on track. Yeah. So there's an awesome module that I wanted to plug, and you mentioned you had some experience with it. So can you tell us what module that is and give us a little bit of details about it?
Yeah. So PSPKI audit, which was released from the SpectreOps folks back in mid 2021, is a PowerShell module that is designed to just audit your PKI configuration. They released it along with their white paper called Certified Pre-Owned, in which they detailed, about 1 million different ways to own Active Directory certificate services. And part of that they did was, they released this white paper and then released the auditing tool first, so you could fix things. And then they did a DEF CON presentation and showed how to break things with their tool Certify. So PSPKI audit, if you're running ADCS, is great. It's a little different from Locksmith. We got some different approaches on things. But yeah, my fingers were in there too. I noticed when I was writing Locksmith, I actually was cross-checking with PSPKI audit. And I was in an environment that I knew very well. It was my former employer. And I had recently stood up a PKI with them. And so I was like, I ran PSPKI audit and it found some things that were marked vulnerable. And I'm like, this doesn't match at all. And it was really just a simple regex problem. They were identifying things that were not, the original tool is identifying things as being part of domain users or something like that. And it wasn't. It was just that regex that it was looking for was not correct. So that got me into my first PR, which I didn't understand what a PR was, and had to have a couple of people kind of like explain it to me and draw things on a on the screen of like, this is how Git works. And I'm like, whew, this is a lot. But yeah, so PSPKI audit. If you're doing ADCS, it is a great tool to have in your back pocket.
So while we're on the subject, and first of all, thank you for adding that extra context. You did a way better job than I would have. But how does this compare to Locksmith? And for those who aren't familiar, what is Locksmith?
Locksmith is a tool that we describe as a small tool to help you find and fix ADCS issues. The thing that's different is that we actually provide remediation code for everything. So almost everything. Some of the things are still being worked on. But yeah, that's the important thing to me. Like before I got into working with Trimark, I worked at a small municipality where we had 3 staff, and I was the only one that had any real interest in securing things. And I am writing tools now for who I was 5 years ago, right? I want to help that one person that, knows that there's more to do and there's more to secure, and there's always going to be more to secure, but just doesn't have the resources and doesn't want to go read, 145-page white paper to get out the 7 lines of code that you really need. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of where, it's kind of where it came from. Why it's different. I love in Locksmith that you run it, and by default it just tells you what your problems are. But you do have to do a little work. You have to type mode 1. But
not too much.
That will give you, code specifically that will just fix these issues immediately. Will there be operational impact? Possibly. We try to warn for that, though. So, yeah.
That's very cool. So I think if you're in the ADCS space and that's probably your primary focus, you may want to use both tools a little bit, kind of.
So each has its own, there's certifies out there, certipies out there. If you're a Python folks, a lot of tools now have these things built in. I think there's some stuff in Inve that can handle ADCS stuff, Rubius, etc. Like they're all, Bloodhound community now has it. Bloodhound Enterprise had ADCS checks. Trimark's assessments, we're doing ADCS checks. So there's like a lot of tools out there that can do it. And I think it's like anything, you find the tool that fits you the best, right? And your method the best. If you're a small-time sysadmin like I was, I'm willing to bet that Locksmith is it's the one that fits you the best.
Yeah, and I like that the most. Just in general, that move towards making things easier for the regular admin who doesn't, like you said, have time or can't go through tons of research to sort of figure out the best way to do everything. They're able to sort of get running and start improving things very quickly, which I'm a huge fan of. And I love what you mentioned about, writing tools for yourself 5 years ago, because that's a lot of what drives me in what I do. It's like trying to help out me 5 years ago, create the resources, be the resource that I really could have benefited from. So love that approach. Now, for those who maybe aren't familiar or haven't worked with it before, what is ADCS and why would a company roll it out?
So ADCS is Active Directory Certificate Services. It was part of the initial release of Active Directory, so Server 2000 era. And it is a public key infrastructure that is tightly, and I mean tightly integrated with Active Directory. The
Nice.
reason most people use it is because they wanted to enable secure communication between their domain controllers, or they're hosting on-prem Exchange and don't want to see the stupid certificate error anymore, right? And so it is an incredibly simple to set up public key infrastructure. However, because it is so simple to set up, it is typically set up incorrectly, is really what it boils down to.
Now, to me, if we're trying to fix this from the biggest angle possible and provide the most security, I feel like making that rollout of it more secure would be better, like by default kind of thing, like out of the box. Do you think that there are improvements that could be made to ADCS and how it's sort of rolled out that would make it easier for people who just click next, finish?
I mean, could it be? Could there be flashing errors in your face when you're hitting next that say this is a problem, this is not secure? I mean, Microsoft's own documentation on first and setting up a PKI says using the default install is not appropriate for production use. Doesn't say that anywhere when you're setting it up. You have to go separately over to learn.microsoft.com and pull it in that way and really. So yes, that could be done. Unfortunately, to really do it properly, it requires a minimum of 2 machines. One that is hello balloons.
Happy birthday.
Sometimes the continuity camera stuff still pops up. I don't understand why, but yeah. But yeah, so you need 2 machines, which is, if you're doing this quickly and you just need it stood up, like, okay, now I got to go do this other thing. And the second machine needs to be not domain joined, and it needs to be in a completely different mode than the one that lives in your domain. And it is not easy. PKI I don't think is ever going to be easy. And I will say that the out of the box next install is secure, except for the fact that it's only a single tier. If they could somehow, stand up a separate VM that operates as your root CA, and then your issuing CA lives in the domain, that would be cool. I don't know how that would happen. It's a lot. It's big. I will forever have a job because of this dumb little research I did in 2021.
I think that's how it goes for some people, though. It's like they sort of specialize in something or really cut their teeth with a particular thing, and they can leverage that expertise both in sort of learning new things, but also like when you do things the right way and really build your foundational knowledge, you can leverage that for a while, which is really cool.
For sure.
But security is hard, and I just don't like the amount of things we have that are insecure by default, all the way down to like documentation. When you're reading documentation for implementing something, it's like, hey, this code is not secure, don't run this, but here's how you get it set up. And the less of that, the better for me. And I hope we can see more and more of that type of thing where it's like easier to have secure by default stuff.
Well, I was chatting with Carlsland. Are you familiar with him?
I am.
The Avalanche guy. Chatting with him this morning, and how it seems like a lot of the the issues that he and I see both in our respective jobs of really seeing the insides of somebody's Active Directory and just seeing how badly it can be done really is a testament to how well Active Directory was designed initially, right? You can take Joe Blow off the street who doesn't super know anything, has some sysadmin chops, but not a ton. Stand up an Active Directory and it's going to run for forever, right? And I think it's been around long enough now that if Microsoft had just an opinion, you're out of the box, you stood up a forest, it's got one domain in it, and all of that stuff that should be set properly is set properly out of the box, and there's an OU structure that clearly delineates tier 0, 1, and 2, and all of these things. Maybe
I mean, you'd think more people would end up on the happy, secure path, making things easier for them, right?
You'd think. There's so one of my coworkers, our lead dev here, Jared Haight. Back when I first started dabbling my fingers in the development of our internal tooling, he kind of made it known that one of his things is guiding the user to the right things. Not even just security, but just like the things that are going to make their life easier. Just guiding them in that direction. Not enforcing, not saying this is the way that it has to be done, but just moving along slowly. And I'm starting to really take that in.
I like that too, especially when you think about like all the work that people do and have to be done, and there's workplace stress that can kind of come into things. The easier you can make it, the better everything will be, all the way down to less clicks on phishing emails. If people are less stressed and busy and stuff like that, and more present and able to sort of work on the important things without being super stressed.
Yeah, for sure. It's just reminds me that I clicked on a phishing test email like the month before I left my old job, and I was like, cool, I'm moving to a security company. This makes me feel really good.
It happens. And I know
I sent those phishing test emails out.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely been on that, and I've tried to make an excuse too whenever I clicked on it in a previous job. But that's the truth. And I think security embraces like security, the community, and just general understanding. They understand that anyone can click on phishing emails. And I think that a lot of times with the sysadmin audience, there is more of a tendency to think that it's like something you can completely avoid, when it is, I mean, humans are human. Everyone can do really well, but with the right crafted message at the right time, humans are going to react.
I mean, we were talking about how we wake up early, sometimes to work out, and that it's 5:30 in the morning, and I'm scrolling through my email on my phone. And maybe my brain is not 100% at that point. So, yeah, that's why we develop defense in depth, right? Layers upon layers upon layers. So,
now, what is security through obscurity, and do you believe in it?
I absolutely. Okay, security through obscurity, changing the names of things, changing the ports, just messing stuff up. I recently presented 2 90-minute training sessions for Fortune 200 company. And in both of them, we had to have a specific 10-minute discussion about naming standards and how you should name your user accounts to clearly indicate what those accounts are used for. And I got pushback in both of that. Well, we were taught, you make your admin accounts blend in with your normal user accounts, and then it'll be hard for attackers to identify who those admins are. And I was like, you could just query group membership for pretty much anybody, right? You can just see that. You can see things like admin count. You could, like, Active Directory being such an open system, like, it's just the way it works. So what you are doing by trying to obscure those admins or whatever is really just making it harder on your defenders, you know? And so, yeah, I am a huge enemy of security through obscurity. The thing that really got me too is when I was studying for my CISSP, and they were going through like encryption algorithms. And an encryption algorithm, right? You know every single step of that algorithm. There's nothing hidden, and it still does what it's supposed to do. It's still protecting your data. So, I mean, that to me is just kind of a dead giveaway of how things should be done.
Yeah. You make the lives of your employees and people responsible for maintaining and securing the systems harder, while also giving yourself false confidence that things are actually secure. It just, yikes.
Yeah. I asked Spencer, I wanted to get a red teamer quote, a pen tester quote to throw up on the screen because I knew the question was going to be coming. And I said, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about hiding usernames? He's like, yeah, it slows me down like 5 seconds. It's not a reasonable speed bump at all. So yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
Well, it was another, like, I first came across this when I joined my previous job, and my manager really just wanted to make sure that all the web servers are run on port 8022 and 8055, and I'm like, it's just making it more difficult for our users to even go to the sites you want them to go to. Nobody remembers that stuff except for us nerds. So
always something though.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
If you're dealing with security through obscurity and you're having to maintain those systems, sorry for you.
Yeah, right. Unless your documentation is really good.
But even still, you have to maintain the documentation.
Right.
More problems.
I don't know if you saw the thing I posted on LinkedIn the other day. So we released a card of backdoors and breaches. Are you familiar with that?
I am. Let's tell the people though, backdoors and breaches. Okay. It's a really cool security card game. Maybe you could tell them a little bit more since it's fresh on your mind. But yeah, I did see that part.
So it's kind of a tabletop RPG style, right? Where you are running an incident response, and you've got an incident commander who kind of lays down 4 different cards. There's initial access, and then pivot and escalate, and then exfil, and something else that I can't remember. But yeah, you just kind of play this. You roll some dice and see if your attempt at trying to reveal one of those cards works. And yeah, that's what backdoors and breaches is. So yeah, I forget where I was going with that.
Documentation. Oh yeah.
So yeah, in our Trimark pack. So we released a pack last month. We have a dude wears our docs card, which is if that gets drawn out, you immediately lose 3 turns because the documentation was never finished, right? So you don't know how to use any of the things the tools that you have available to you. And my favorite part about that is on every backdoors and breaches card, there's a link across the bottom that you can follow to get more information. The bottom of that one just says http://
Ooh. I thought you were going to say localhost, but yeah, that's awesome. So I want to touch on backdoors and breaches just a little bit more. So that's sort of like a tabletop exercise, right?
It really is. So like you can use it internally, just among your technical staff, and like, hey, do we have this thing covered? It's kind of like the MITRE attack matrix, but simplified. Do we have this thing? Can we do this thing well? Have we had people that have had training on the thing, et cetera, et cetera? But because it's also incredibly easy to understand what's going on, you can bring in other stakeholders that are not technical folk, and they can get a vibe for what's going on too, and what sort of coverage you have, or how things might work out in the real world. Hey, can we call this person? Well, we don't have legal, we don't have that. Oh, that we just identified a gap, right? So yeah, it's very cool. I really love the way that Black Hills set it up as it really hits that middle. That's perfect to kind of work with any crowd.
Yeah. And I think it's a great way if you're trying to start taking more security stuff seriously and start having conversations. I think it's a great entry point potentially for actually getting people involved in this space. Because I think so many of us, one, we don't fully understand if our environment is secure. And spoiler alert, it's probably not if you don't know and don't have insights or anything like that. And when you can start taking things more seriously and you can introduce something like this in sort of a casual way, like if you have a weekly or monthly meetup where you're just kind of hanging out with your team, socializing. We do those here at PDQ, I think every few weeks or something like that. It's a great chance to get people in that mindset and to start thinking about actually what's going on, because I think most people are just waiting till something breaks. Like, it's such a scary thing. They're dreading the day that something happens. And this is a way to start being a little bit more proactive and getting more than just hopefully you involved in taking responsibility and thinking about things from this perspective.
I will say that was one of my first, like, before I joined Trimark, I saw Black Hills have this thing about this game, and I was like, I don't even know what would be included in this game. Like, I'm not sure what C2 and exfil means, right? Like, I don't understand these things, and the way that all of them are written, they really stressed. So going through the process of creating this pack, like, Jason and Deb from Black Hills really stressed how these need to be introductory level. Like, we're not getting into the nitty gritty of what a Kerberos attack is. We're not explaining nuts and bolts of how admin SD holder actually protects various objects in your environment, right? But you can discuss these things at a high level and then provide links for more information. And every single step of getting them created really kind of enforced that accessibility thing. And so, yeah, it's awesome. Go out and buy a Trimark pack, get yourself a core pack. We've got some fun ones in there too, like a bear attacks a power station. Yeah, why not?
Whoa, why not? It could happen.
Yeah, it could happen.
And you probably wouldn't think about it unless you actually went through it or got this. And I think it's a pretty approachable thing. You could hopefully expense it and, kind of sell it to your manager as you're trying to start making more of a transition and getting more people on the same page of securing things. And I think managers worry about that too. The whole insecurity. One day we'll be hacked. They read all these news articles all the time. Big companies like Microsoft being affected. Yeah.
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 I mean, I so coming from my previous man, obviously right now where I'm working at Trimark, like, there's everybody's security focused. Like, it's not a problem there. But previous gig, it was, managers being scared of stuff, but also not being willing to, like, do the research to figure out exactly what was happening. And I feel like that's just a symptom of I mean, it's almost always under budget, right? We're always everybody's under resourced. I've dealt with companies that are, Fortune 5 that are like, hey, we just don't have the money to do this. And how, if that's at that size of company, like, what is it at, mom and pop shop? So yeah,
It's good time to be employed in security. I think it will continue to be for a while.
I had hair before I started working in security. No.
That's fun stuff though. I think that what you said about the terms like C2 and stuff like that, like, those can be a little intimidating, especially whenever I was first starting to follow along the security community, trying to take ownership of our systems and secure them. A big part of it was like coming up to speed with all these terms. And I found that once you sort of understand the lingo, you don't have to understand all the technical details about how to do it yourself and hack it yourself and all this. But once you can start to understand that stuff, it sort of fills in the whole picture of what's out there.
It really does. And it's like, you kind of get your toe in, right? And you kind of feel how that feels, and then you realize it's not so bad, and then a little more and a little more and a little more and a little more. And then you look back 6 months later and you're like, oh wow, like, I can understand all of this stuff. It's pretty cool.
So, and I'm not sure how informed on this you'll be, but one thing that I've thought was interesting with security, and particular from like the attacker illegal activity hackers mindset, is that there's just this huge economy around it where you have people getting access and then selling that access to other people who use it for other things. And it's like this whole huge ecosystem. Do you see that? Is that still kind of how things are? Is what I said even true?
I think you are right. I intentionally do not dabble in that world too much, just because it scares me, honestly. But yes, I mean, listening to Darknet Diaries, there's these giant underground marketplaces that are just Darknet Diaries, Motherboard, like all of these tech related things. It's like anything you want, you can buy, right? And usually it's not that expensive either. Like, it's
Surprisingly, yeah.
wild buying, 100 valid credit cards for $10 or whatever it is. It's like, wow, that is shocking. I recently heard about Ticketmaster and the secondary market for people buying, because you can't just sign up for a new account and then buy Ticketmaster now and resell your tickets, right? You have to have an account that has some age, that has visited some concerts, and then you're allowed to resell your ticket and all this thing. So like, reselling those aged accounts is now a thing. And it's like, what? Who would think of it? Okay.
So similar-ish question. So you maintain somewhat of a public profile. I maintain some of a public profile. How do you grapple being in the public eye while also being in security? I know a lot of us in that space are a little paranoid about data being out there, but how do you handle that, I guess, mentally and also in practice with your OPSEC?
I'm terrible. I'm terrible at OPSEC. Like, other than, I don't even remember what the name of it is. Consumer Reports has an app called Permission Slip that will automatically for you go out and remove your data from, all these data broker sites and request that your private data be removed. And Delete.me does the same thing, but I believe they're a paid service. Like, I use one of those services. I use Permission Slip. But other than that, I mean, I'm just not posting my address out on the internet. If somebody were to spend probably 20 minutes, they would be able to find where I am, like, without a problem.
Same thing here.
That being said, the way that I do it is I just try to be a positive person, and just like a kind and positive person in all things, and just not try to develop enemies, I guess, is really what it boils down to. I used to be kind of a jerk. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was not the nicest person. And about 10 years ago, just had some changes happen in my life, and really kind of changed the way that I approach living. And I have a daughter now. She's about to turn 10, so maybe that's probably it right there. And just understanding that, like, being kind and happy and positive in the world, and not like in a toxic way, but everybody's got their bad days. But I think doing that, if I don't make myself a target, then the chances are less. They're not zero. Don't get me wrong. I understand. But yeah, that's kind of where I boil it down. How do you handle it?
Honestly, pretty much the exact same as you. That's
Yeah.
why I was like so stoked what you're saying, because yeah, that's the exact same approach. If people really wanted to, for some reason, even if I did have great OPSEC, I'm not that good. They would find something. It's not like I bought my house with an LLC or whatever you have to do to hide your address and all this stuff. No, I try to limit the personal stuff I post, but I know people say you're not even supposed to say when you're leaving your house and stuff like that. But if I'm going to a conference, it's not going to be a secret.
That is actually one thing that I do, is I do not mention when I am leaving for an extended period of time anymore. And that's because in 2017, I had my house broken into, and they stole, oh, not those guitars, but some other guitars that I have, some guitars and a game station and some other like things. And luckily I was able to retrieve most of that, but immediately, security cameras and security system and all that stuff went into place.
Yeah, just for the ease of mind, it's so worth it, in my opinion.
It really is, except for I installed all of them all the cameras in my attic when it was 110 degrees outside and it was like 130 in the attic. I don't recommend that. Other than that, it was
Hey, you didn't pass out. You made it out of the attic, so.
Oh man, it was touch and go there for a second too.
Yeah, if I'm going on vacation, I won't. But if I'm speaking in a conference, it is hard to hide that fact. So I just got to kind of roll with it. But I don't bring my whole family with me, so my house isn't robbable.
We often have, no, we always have. So I don't know if you can see. Oh, she's not in camera right now, but I've got a dog. I've got a couple cats. We've got a pool. Like those things need to be cared for when we are gone. So we always have a house sitter anyway. So it's not. Yeah, and my house sitter now is my father-in-law, who's retired, so he literally doesn't leave the house. So yeah, bring it on, guys. You want to come visit? It's all good.
Some of my favorite memories, and hopefully my family isn't watching this, was whenever I would dog sit for my sister's house whenever I was a teenager and just get the whole place to myself. Good times.
Heck yeah. I'm sure he's living that same life here. I know he brings over all his musical equipment and gets it all set up and has his VR rig is all set up. And he's like, I don't have to deal with anybody. I just get to be here and play.
I remember they had a hammock in the backyard. I tried sleeping out there one night because I just whole place myself. I'm a teenager. Oh, all right. Well, let's go back in time. We've gone on a little adventure here before, which I've really enjoyed whenever I forgot to freaking plug the module and we just moved on. But get a little bit into your background with PowerShell for automating things and then eventually your transition into security and how that all transpired.
PowerShell.
It's a loaded question, right?
Yeah, it really is, right? Ever since I started working in tech in the year 2000, so started, just doing tier 1 support for a cable modem company back then. But even before that, like I was just figuring out like things like batch files, and just what can you do with that, right? And I moved from that tier 1 support job into a consulting job, actually. But it was security focused, which meant we built custom firewalls, which was cool. Built them on Red Hat. I don't remember which version, but before they split into Fedora and Red Hat, it was back when it was just Red Hat. And built those on IP tables with Strong Swan as a VPN service. And so like building these for customers and, a basic firewall has the same basic rules, right? You deny everything to start and then you build up from there. And the guy that was sort of he wasn't my boss directly, but he was definitely like the gray beard of the company at that point. And I'm sure he was, 32 or something, like by no means an old guy. And he kind of taught me how to do scripting in Bash. And so we would use Bash scripts to pre-create these IP tables rule sets. And so that kind of got me into like really automating things that were useful. And sometimes I played around a little bit and wrote a Bash script to, vote for my favorite band on a website 48 times a second, like sometimes. But it just kind of got my fingers into the automation world in a way that shows me that it's not just goofing around, but this could be fun, right? He showed me how to write logon scripts for the entire company that would just be, one logon script that handled everybody in our company. Cool, this is awesome. And then I moved into my municipal government job, and I was low man seniority wise. Like I didn't have the experience that everybody else did. I didn't have this is my first time working in like any real capacity doing administration. And I assumed at that point that everybody else was like automating things because my old graybeard, boss before was really into automation. And it took me probably 7 or 8 years before I realized, wait, nobody else is automating stuff. They are literally writing fresh stuff anytime they need to write a logon script, they need to write anything. SQL queries, whatever. These are all fresh every single time. And I'm like, guys, do you know that computers can do the stuff that you are doing? Like, so all you have to do is enter a few things and then it creates it all. And so I kind of took it upon myself to we literally had like, I'm going to say in the hundreds number of logon scripts at a company where we had 300 employees. Yeah, I saw your eyes get big there for a second. And so I took it upon myself to, number one, automate how we were creating logon scripts for people. Like, so you just, okay, they need these drives, and these printers. Boom, batch file, spit out, done, cool. And then every time I, started to research how to automate something, I was like, oh, what is this PowerShell thing I've been reading about? I'd open it up. I'm like, I don't like this blue background, but okay, it's fine. What are these weird commands? Like, they're not bash, they're not batch, they're not, what is this? What are we doing here? And so I'd play around for a second, and then I would stop and go back to my old safety of batch, right? And then we were in charge of supporting technology at our municipal court. The municipal court revamped all of their recording equipment, and they modernized from, it was previously like a bunch of just hodgepodge kind of consumer grade stuff, but they kind of made it all into pro grade recording equipment with like a giant mixer that had internal recording built in. I believe it was an 8-track recorder built into the mixer and so that was perfect for recording. We had about eight microphones in each courtroom. So all of that stuff got recorded into this system, but it was in like a really weird format and it wasn't being archived. And so I was like, I can write a batch script that will take all this and rename it all and move it into our archive locations. Cool. And immediately hit the limits of batch. Like, it was not even, it was like 2 days into it. I'm like, oh, this is not going to work. So I'm like, okay, what can I do? Well, I don't want to learn Python, and I still don't want to learn Python. Don't make me learn Python. But I was like, okay, let's go check out this PowerShell thing. And I don't know what it was about that project, but it was like immediately something just kind of made it click that you're piping things from one to another, and it's objects, and the objects have these properties that you can change, and like I really don't know how, but it was just sort of like continuing to plug at it until I just woke up one day and I was like, okay, objects. It's objects moving around. It's not text. I still have to fight against that. I will tell you, coming from the Bash world originally, like, why am I not grabbing this text? Why is this text not parsing properly? It's not text. Yeah, cool.
It's a common struggle, I think.
But yeah, so I did that, and it was great. It would, it was like a weekly thing. It would run, it would pull all these files out, it would reformat them, it would place them somewhere else, and then make it, provide a clear transcript of what happened to the judges so they knew that things happened properly. And then it was like, I got a new hammer, man. I'm going to hit all the nails. I'm just bam, 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 bam. And so, yeah, the next big one that I remember was our company didn't want to pay for software to automatically create a unified signature on everybody's email. I have all the data in AD. Let's just do this. So yeah, created a little HTML that pulled data out of AD and threw it into this HTML and saved it in everybody's user drives. So that way, when they loaded Outlook, it was just there. And yeah, and then it's started transitioning all of my little batch tools that I had built over to PowerShell, and then created I called it the Omni script that you would run, and it presented a text menu that you could then select all the smaller scripts, and it just built and built and built and built. Yeah.
Nice.
So,
and then eventually you sort of made it a transition into security.
So yeah, mid-May of 2021, May 17th. Not that I have it memorized or tattooed or anything. No. Yeah, Sean Metcalf, adsecurity.org, founder of Trimark, posted on Twitter, hey, if you're an ops or admin and you want to transition into security, DM me. And I'd been dabbling in that space again after 15 years or so, because there was a water plant in Florida that had been, that had been compromised. And so we were a utility. We had water utilities, and our utilities director was like, we're getting a security assessment done now. See where we're at. And like all the stuff preparing for that security assessment, not just cleaning up all the stuff that I needed to know to be cleaned up before, but had never had the time for, but also just documenting and figuring out how things really worked, and not just understand, not just guessing how they kind of worked. All of that kind of really relit the fire that I had for security 15 years earlier. So yeah, Sean posted this, and I DM'd him, and I told him, hey, these are all the various technologies I work in, and I don't know where my next step is. I wasn't looking for a job, but I knew it needed to be something in security. I was thinking maybe transition to a security role in my current job. Maybe that would be cool. And talked to him for a little while, and he's like, well, yeah, do you have a resume? I'm like, no, I'm not looking for a job. Well, give me a resume. We'll see what we can do. And 2 months later, I'm working there. And then all of our internal tooling at the time that I was hired was all built in PowerShell. And I took to it, right? Just dove right into that water, and not realizing that Sean had written everything, I ran into a bug in week 2 of being there, and I fixed it. And I pushed it to main. I was like, hey, I did this thing. I fixed this. And somebody else is like, oh, Sean's been working on that for a while. And I'm like, oh no, what did I just do? Oh no. But I mean, Sean's cool as hell. He was just like, yeah, it needed to be fixed. You fixed it. Good job. Cool. I have no ego about this. I'm like, fantastic. So yeah, and then shortly thereafter, it was, Sean asked around, and hey, we need to integrate ADCS checks into our assessments. Does anybody want to take that on? And I'm like, well, I just stood up a new PKI at my old job a year ago. I still understand most of what's going on. So I was like, I'll do it. And now I'm the ADCS guy at work, and locksmith and all that. It's weird how life happens, man.
That's exciting, though. I mean, so it sounds like you were at your old kind of role and responsibilities for a while. Was it sort of like a renaissance whenever you transition into security? Are you more excited and engaged with your career now, or has there been any changes in that way?
My wife mentioned within a month that I seemed like a happier person. Just immediately seemed like a happier person. It's when you find a role that you are suited for, it doesn't feel like work. I hate when people say love what you do and you'll never work a day. No, sometimes the job sucks, right? Every job sucks. But on the whole, like, yeah, like I just, it's a renaissance. Like you said, it's a reinvigorating and yeah, it really makes me just want to go learn new stuff all the time.
One thing I'm sort of hearing is that it sounds like you're empowered to do things. And I think that if you find yourself the type of person to listen to something like a PowerShell podcast, you're probably the type of person that sort of likes getting their hands dirty. But I think at a lot of roles, doing things like that is such an uphill climb culturally, technically. When you combine it all, you're having to work like 3 jobs to start getting things done in certain cultures. And it sounds like at your new place, you're empowered. There's a good culture with like not much ego, collaboration. And I think security at large, that community is very much about collaboration because the threats are so large. It just requires it.
Well, it's shocking. Like, you know, I mentioned Spectre Ops, I mentioned Lars. Like, these people are technically out Trimark competitors, right? Like Black Hills, Trimark like, but if we all siloed off our information, if we siloed off like our learning from each other, it's not us that will hurt. It's the general public. And like, what kind of person are you if you don't? It, don't get me wrong, there are still some people like that in security, but on the whole, yeah, I think it's a very, just sharing what you know, is such a huge part of the whole thing. You know, speaking at conferences and doing trainings, and like, we do these things and in general do not get paid for them. Like, you know, yeah, your company may pay for you to go to a place, and but they're, a lot of times the conferences aren't paying you to give your speech. You're just, they just want you to be there to talk. And yeah, and it's shocking. So I am going to be speaking at another conference sometime soon that is not a security focused one, and it's about ed tech. And like, they mentioned, hey, you're going to be speaking, so here's how much the booth costs. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm just sharing information. I have to buy a booth. Like, well, yeah. I'm like, well, that's I'm just kind of doing this on my own, man. Like, it's not, I just want to share information. And they ended up making an exception for me, but like, I was not prepared for that. So I'm not sure if that's a normal thing outside of the security space, but
You never know. I know some of these conferences, the bigger ones, end up paying some good money to people who are their keynotes and things like that. But yeah, I usually stick to the smaller conferences.
yeah. Well, I feel like too, the people that come to the smaller conferences, you're coming there because you want to learn. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to a B-sides conference in like a tiny little town and it's going to be 50 people, like, you're not there to get famous or to experience the conference party scene. You know what I mean? Like, it's just some people in a small conference room. So yeah, it's a different vibe for sure.
Now, you mentioned, ops, sysadmin background, and they were looking for that at Trimark. Sean, you mentioned, was looking for that type of background. Do you think that's a good background? I think it is. And I think I've mentioned this a few times, but I know a lot of our audience here has that background where they've been working on AD or environments for a long time in terms of administering them, but then making that transition to be dedicated in security. Is it a good background?
1,000,000%, man. Like, so number one, you really have to understand, to be a good sysadmin, to be great in ops, whatever. You really have to understand things at a deep level, right? You're not just taking what the dashboard is telling you, right? You're understanding why the dashboard is telling you these things, and how these things are being generated. So you have that. You also, at least I was this way, figure out how to make stuff work, right? I know this is a computer. This computer should be able to talk to this computer. And yeah, they're speaking different languages for whatever reason. I know I can make those work. I know I can make those communicate with each other. That willingness to continue trying, like almost uh, almost in a problematic way sometimes. Like I know that I'm going to solve this problem. Either it's going to be me, or I'm going to, I'm going to fix it, or I'm going to die. That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that happens. But yeah, everybody at Trimark, everybody has an ops background of some sort, and at least 10 years. Like it just seems to be the type of person that works best, especially when working with Active Directory, which is our bread and butter, but Azure AD and virtual infrastructure as well. But again, like, how to make stuff work. How to glue this to that,
And poke
to make it,
around and figure
and
things out.
poke around, and yeah.
And you mentioned, sysadmins don't just look at the dashboard and, that kind of thing. I think there are some that do, but I think that learning PowerShell or really getting the opportunity to look at things and understand and sort of from a bigger picture, understand how things are connecting and expecting to be communicated. Once you get to that part of things where you're comfortable really identifying, oh, hey, here are the event logs that this generates. Let me check those and see what's actually going on, or maybe check the traffic, like what is going on here, check the packet. Like when you're able to start really diving deep, I think it's a great time, because security is kind of confusing. If you are going into it like as a first job, I imagine that would be really tough.
I honestly cannot imagine like going directly into it. Like I see all these, there's the common meme in security circles about like, okay, you're getting an entry level security job, you need 5 years of experience and a CISSP, right? And you're like, those two don't really mesh, right? Entry level or you need experience. And it's almost to me like you just need to have, it's like that job should not be just called entry level. It's a junior position, right? It's not an entry level position, and there really aren't any entry level positions in security. Is the way that I see it. You have to have some working experience to even really understand the majority of it. So
yeah, and in a bunch of different ways, both in how a company tends to work, both in how systems work, the context of the different services that a company offers and how they work together and all that. It's a lot, even just if you're understanding the business process side of things with nothing technical.
well, yeah, like if you're in GRC, right, governance, risk, and compliance, there are very few entry level jobs on that too. You have to understand business management and supply chain, and it's like, oof.
For sure.
That side is scary. I will say that. I just want to type stuff.
Yep. Awesome, Jake. Well, you've prepared for these. I got some curveballs to throw your way regarding our.
I love. By the way, I love that we did not touch on any of our notes that we discussed.
Like I said, it's just a convo. Who knows? We spent about 10 minutes going through, okay, yeah, we're going to dabble on this and touch on this. And then we're talking and I'm just like, and I'm going to ask about this. Why not? But yeah, that's how it goes. Yeah, it's been an awesome chat so far, but now is the hard part where we ask the real questions. So
I am as prepared as I can be, man.
All right. First question, and please don't get this wrong. The people out there are looking to you for some guidance on this. I know it's a hot button issue plaguing all of us currently engaging in social media. And that is, if you put an emoji at the end of a sentence, if you put an emoji at the end of a sentence, where do you put the period? Before or after the emoji?
Oh man, I'm going to be an after the period guy.
Wow.
And here's why.
You went there. Okay.
Here's why. I have a defense, man.
Okay.
After the period, the emoji encapsulates the whole sentence. Before the period, that emoji just refers to the word before it. Because I've done emojis in a sentence, and they're always directly after the word that I want to emphasize.
You blew my mind. You're just next level. I was not thinking things that deeply. You showed me up on that one. I was just going to say no period, but the fact that you have a choice. I mean, you're making design decisions with where you place the period. I respect that a lot.
I didn't realize there was a secret third option that I was allowed to take.
Well, you know, there are all these questions are loaded. So,
damn.
All right, back to more standard questions. Okay,
All
that
right,
was
cool.
was a nice little curveball there. But so early on in your career, what advice would you give yourself based on what you've learned so far and where you are now that could maybe accelerate your journey, maybe give you some less suffering or anything along those lines?
Honestly, like, ask for help. Like, to get into this field, you're generally a self-starter, and sometimes that self-starting really prevents you from growing at the speed that you're capable of, because you think you can figure it out all yourself. And I am speaking directly to my former self at this moment. Like, you think you can learn it all, but there's always going to be somebody out there that knows more than you. Even when you think you know it all, there's always somebody out there that knows more than you. And admitting that you don't know something does not make you look weak. It does not make you look stupid. It makes you a person who doesn't know that one specific thing. And like, I didn't really take that to heart until joining Trimark. Like, we have a very strong culture of, like, I don't know. Tell me. I don't know. Explain this thing. And if I had had that 20 years ago, who knows? Yeah, so that's exactly what I would have told that.
And
younger me.
to tap onto something you said earlier about spending hours at the keyboard and you're going to solve this issue before you're done. That is a great mindset to have, but it needs to be balanced with, like you're saying, asking for help. If you are really struggling and you're not learning from being lost and trying to connect things, because there is a lot of value in spending longer than it could take to solve a task if you're really learning it hands-on, connecting some dots for yourself. But definitely don't want to do that if you're just suffering and you have to do work. And the best way is to be honest. I think as humans, there's that huge tendency to not want to appear stupid, which is why it's so helpful to have people in higher up positions or people who are respected who say that they don't know, because it really sets the standard. And when you have that culturally, it's a much more psychologically safe environment to work in and just more productive overall. It's just better for you. And to me, if I see someone who's willing to admit mistakes, I am more likely to trust them. You want to know, you can tell after a while if people are sort of, wait, do they really know what's going on? It comes out. So you want to be honest for sure.
That saying, you can't bullshit to censor myself a little bit there. That whole facade does come crashing down, and why not just be honest up front?
For sure. Because you want to be able to be yourself and be comfortable being yourself. If you create a persona or an image that isn't you, you are stuck in that prison. And from earlier on in my career, that is not a fun place to be. You want to be able to be yourself. And if there are things you need to work on as a person, that's fine. We all have things we need to work on, but you're going to have a lot more enjoyment and comfort in life if you're able to be yourself and give yourself that space.
Can I give my earlier self a second point?
All day.
Get into therapy for at least a little bit. That's all. Like, even if you don't think you need therapy, get into therapy and do therapy for a year. Like, it's amazing.
I completely agree. I think that the money I spent on therapy has been the highest ROI in terms of like life, but also career. Like when you're able to better understand yourself and how you interact with others and making sure that that's, you're all in order. Because whenever you're doing well, you do your best work. And that applies to employers should be aware of that all the way down to you. It's your responsibility to take care of yourself and to vouch for yourself and advocate for yourself and all that. So,
yeah,
man, 100%. Shout out younger us. Listen up. Good tips.
You got that time machine going yet? Or
I'm still working on it. PowerShell isn't quite there yet. Next question is, what are some of your favorite modules? You can go 3. And if you're feeling it, you can go 4.
I'm just going to do 3 because I weird thing, I don't tend to use a lot of other people's modules. I I haven't gotten into that ecosystem a ton yet. And also, when I joined Trimark, like we were very much everything is written in house. So I did stuck with that. But number one, far and away, would not be here where I am without it. The Active Directory module from RSAT. I mean, honestly, like it makes everything so much easier. I'm currently working on eliminating the Active Directory modules from Locksmith and any other tool that I write, whether it's internal or external. And LDAP queries suck, man. So they really did a lot of good work with Active Directory module. So number two, our honorary fourth member of the Locksmith core team, PK Shemek, the Evotech guy, did PS publish module, which before he rewrote or submitted a giant PR to us in July of last year, recreating Locksmith as a module using PS publish module. It was one giant script, and it was, I want to say we were pushing 3,000 lines or something like that. And so, working in a file of that size, it's just not fun. It's not fun. You forget where stuff is, and it was all broken into functions and stuff, but it's still like it's not fun to work in. And so he, broke it up into individual files, and it just, my development efforts after that like skyrocketed. Like I had hit a point where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then so PS publish module, it's pretty great.
Sweet.
And and then third one, shockingly, Microsoft.PowerShell.console GUI tools.
Oh yes,
that creates out console grid view.
Dude, I didn't know you're into that too. Let's go. Did you know I was into that?
No, I did not know.
I love that. I love that you said that too. I just commented on Spencer's thing. He was talking about creating some GUI tools with PowerShell, and I was like, GUIs are cool, but TUIs are where it's at. Terminal user interfaces.
Yo, so have you used the Iron Man software, their TUI builder?
I have.
Okay, is it good? I want to dip into it, but yeah.
I had an issue with it,
okay,
but it is good. I think there was an update that kind of fixed the bug I was having, but it's pretty cool. I love out console grid view though, especially plugging it on the podcast, because like you said, that's a command that comes with this Microsoft.PowerShell.console GUI tools, which allows you to very easily create TUI tools, terminal user interfaces, where you display data and then run some command based on your selections of the data. That's simple.
Yeah. So the reason I even found it and started using it is because all of our internal tools, like I said, most of them now at this point are still PowerShell. But like selecting the right directory for where the thing is, and like selecting the right options to run this. And yeah, you can remember all the parameters, but you know what? Sometimes it's early in the morning and I haven't had my coffee and I can't remember all of the things, and I don't want to go read the help, and I don't want, no. Pops up a menu, I select the thing, we move on, we're done, right? So yeah, love it.
So good. So good. Love to hear that. Yeah. And the thing I like to point to too is less content switching, right? We talk about making things a little bit easier, freeing up some brain space. And for me, having external windows and switching between them just adds more to it. If I can have more things straight up in my console, I'm down for that. I'm down for that all day. Yeah.
My, the lead dev was like, why did you add this? Is it because it makes it easier or just because it's cool? And I was like, a little from column A, a little from column B. Like,
yeah. I gave a talk on terminal user interfaces at PowerShell Summit, and it definitely just feels cool. I mean, retro is in again, and it just, dude, I feel like a hacker whenever I'm like in my console with these cool tools that I've written. I'm like, it's a good time.
Well, I like too that like even though it is console, like you can still use your mouse in that one, and that's cool too. Like sometimes I forget that I have to, I can go through and space and select my options. I can just click. So yeah.
Great shout out. Awesome. Links to everything he mentioned will be in the show notes. Now, the final question: what did you screw up in your career, and what could you have learned from it?
Okay.
One of those. All right.
It was probably 2018, and I had already done. I was comfortable with PowerShell at that point, right? And I regularly was having to get into users' mailboxes, and like I just wanted to delete spam. Like spam makes it through our filters. I want to delete it, right? Before users even see it, that sort of thing. I came across a single script that would read through all your users' mailboxes, and you could identify a single user and delete a single message with this specific subject, or all users with this specific subject, or that sort of thing. And it came from Microsoft, or at least on a site that they own. So I was like, oh, this has got to be safe. So I woke up a Monday morning and I saw a crappy spam message. It was a phishing message, and it had been sent to every single person in the company. I'm like, cool, I got the tool. Let's go do the tool. And I'm from home. I load it up and I choose the right options and I type in the subject name. And the subject name ended with a period, or the subject ended with a period. And then it also, I was like, I just want to catch everything. So I'm going to put a star there at the end too. Not understanding what regex was and what dot star means. And so I did that from home, and then I drove into work. And by the time I had gotten to work, I had a couple of voicemails, and it was like, hey, I just tried to look at my email and I have no messages in my inbox. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. And by about the fourth one that I got, I was like, oh no, what did I do? And I flipped back over to my PowerShell window, and it's still chugging along. Like before, if I was deleting a single message from every single mailbox, it was over in 2 minutes or whatever. Like it wasn't long. And I'm like, oh no, what did I do? And because of that wild card, it was deleting every single email out of every single mailbox. And so I immediately stop it, of course. And thankfully, it had started with the newest created users and deleting from their mailboxes and moving through, right? So luckily, we had just started, like it was a summer time. We had just hired a bunch of pool workers who didn't get email. So they thankfully oh, I lost, my sign up email or whatever. No big deal. And I had, by the time it was probably 10 a.m. or so, I rolled around and I decided we can restore people's emails back to 2 a.m. or whatever the last time was that the backup took effect. Did that. Everybody was happy. The one person that was a power user had lost everything from 2 until 10. Everybody else is like, no big deal. Cool. I move on with my day. And then about 10 o'clock that night, my phone rings from my municipal administrator, who was one of the few people that I let through my do not disturb. You let the boss's boss let through the do not disturb. And I answer and like, hey, Lori, what's going on? She's like, so tell me about the hack. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, we got hacked today, and the local news is calling me about it and want to know what the details are. And I'm like, what? And I started like laughing on the phone, right? And she's like, what's going on? I'm like, the hack was me. I was the idiot who didn't understand how to properly remove this single message from everybody's mailbox. And she's like, so there was no incident? I'm like, no, if there was an incident, you would have known like immediately when this happened. No, there was nothing. It was just me being a dummy. She's like, oh, thank God. So,
oh man.
So yeah, I was almost the 11 o'clock news that night. And yeah, thankfully no major blowback. But
Jeez, it's still stressful. I'm clenching up over here on my tippy toes. I had a similar issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar where I wrote like some tools to find spam messaging and get rid of them or whatever and provide them to my team. And he ran it on our CFO's mailbox with a WildStar and deleted all of our emails, really just moved them to a different mailbox, which we got to recover. But it was scary because I was like, where on earth did all of her email go? And I had to like look through the logs and see that, oh, someone moved them and figure out the whole situation. Those are always fun. Email's an important thing, some people say.
It is wild how much email is. Oof. Yeah. Email is amazing in that it will continue to try to deliver forever, and terrible in that there is so little security built in. Man. But I tell you what, learning Exchange, there's a skill set. I've debated standing up an Exchange server at my house. So that's where I'm at. Just say.
Whoa. So here's what I heard about Exchange. I heard that the only people who know enough about Exchange to secure it work at Microsoft.
It's probably true. It's probably true.
Who knows?
I just want a good calendar. That's all.
Right? Fair enough. Well, thank you so much for chatting, man. It's been a pleasure. Time flew by. It was great. Yeah. I know we were both a little bit nervous before we hit live, but I think this turned out into a great one. Thank you, everybody, for listening out there. Hit us up with a like, comment, subscribe. You can join us on the PDQ Discord, discord.gg/PDQ, PowerShell Scripting Channel. Yo, what's up? Shout out to everybody in there. Shout out to all the Discord friends out there. If you have feedback, questions, whatever, PowerShell@pdq.com. Send it. I'll read it. And if it's appropriate, I might read it on air. Woohoo. You can find us on X at PowerShell Pod. I'm Andrew Platek on socials and Andrew Pla on LinkedIn. Jake. Dude, great getting to meet you. This is our first time chatting. It's always fun whenever I do these and get to make a new friend. But where can I and others on the World Wide Web keep track of you and what you're up to?
Easiest way is to go to Twitter and look for ..horse. That's DOT horse. I've got some links to some other places there. I don't actually interact on Twitter, but it's easiest still because that's where InfoSec Twitter lives. I'm on InfoSec Exchange as Horse, LinkedIn as Jake Hildreth. That's probably where I'm the most active. And then try Mark Jake on GitHub. We are always accepting PRs for Locksmith. There's another tool that I have which is called Blue Tuxedo, which is like Locksmith but for Active Directory integrated DNS, so finding and fixing your problems. Any of those, and
links and show notes too,
or any conferences that are coming up. I'll be speaking at B-Sides Charm and B-Sides 312, and the EdTech one that I think is private. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jake. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and everyone out there driving, chilling, listening to us, have a great day as well.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.